from The Daily Show. I don't think he means anything bad by it at all. But when you were on Alexandria, he said, there's those who say, look, I agree with you, but how do you pay for this? How do you make it economically feasible, referring to Medicare for all? There's some who argue and say, I hear what you're saying, Ms. Cortez, and I'm with you, but a $15 minimum wage may stifle economic growth.
First of all, she's already been asked how to pay for it by somebody else, and she basically already admitted she has no idea, and has no idea what she's talking about, and there's no way to pay for it. So the fact that Trevor Noah is even asking her the question again, like, oh, here's another chance to try to explain it, because I know you've screwed this up really bad, and you've probably been coached how to do it since. So here, I'll throw you a softball, even though there's no good way to pay for it, and it's a horrible idea, but here's a softball.
So before I get to the bad guys of Fox News, okay, Alexandria, what's wrong with that framing?
Well, I think what is wrong is that we end up falling into a trap. We end up falling into the right's trap of framing, which is that whenever they want something, we never ask how much it's going to cost. Whenever they want to authorize unlimited war, whenever they want to cut.
What is she talking about? Democrats and liberals are constantly obsessing about how much everything that the Republicans do costs, and it's honestly just so disingenuous when they do, because they literally don't care about deficits or government spending, except for when it's some Republican idea about, national defense. And hey, genius Ocasio-Cortez, here's an idea. You know what the difference is between Medicare for all and the United States military? The U.S. military is a constitutionally enumerated power of the federal government. Healthcare is not. Healthcare is nowhere in the Constitution. There's absolutely no basis for the federal government to be involved in healthcare decisions under the U.S. Constitution. That should be a state issue. And so not only is it a horrible financial decision for the United States to even consider something as stupid as Medicare for all, but it's unconstitutional. And so that's the other difference. She wants to sit here and complain about, oh, I care so much about our deficit spending, and I want to balance the budget, and so, but look at how much we're spending on military spending. We should do this all on an unconstitutional program like Medicare for all.
Our tax revenue down by $2 trillion. We never ask, how are you going to pay for some of the largest expenditures that we've had in the last 20 years?
They do it all the time, and it's disingenuous when they do it.
Only when we talk about education, healthcare, and housing do we...
Education, healthcare, and housing aren't constitutionally enumerated powers of the federal government.
Talk about empty
does she even know what an enumerated power is? I would doubt it.
Pockets. The truth of the matter is, the way that we pay for these programs is the same exact way that we pay for endless war, trillion-dollar tax cuts, except the only difference.
And also that she's following into the classic liberal idea that you have to pay for tax cuts. The only way you ever suggest that you have to pay for tax cuts is if you actually think all of the money is the federal government's to begin with, and it's just the federal government is just graciously allowing some people to have some of their money, but it all actually belongs to the government. And so for a tax cut, you actually have to pay for the tax cut, which just goes to show how sick and twisted the worldview and the perspective is at some of these radicals on the left, like this woman here.
Is that this is an actual investment in our economy that creates wealth on the other end, whereas all of those other things do not.
So I think that's exactly right. And that's
so dumb.
I really think that for guys like Trevor, I'm positive he has no bad intent at all. And
nobody disagrees that government spending on education is a positive thing. That's why there's free public education in every single state in the country. The problem is the federal government's broke. They don't have the money to do it. Additionally, federal government involvement in education has been a net negative on educational outcomes in this country. And it's a state issue. It's not in the Constitution. There's no reason the federal government should be involved in education whatsoever. This is just so bad.
It goes for most of the CNN anchors, etc. But I know that everybody's used to the conservatives calling the media liberal. But I really believe that their mindset, their framing is not remotely progressive, because I've seen it happen.
Also, this is one of Shank's pet issues. He constantly loves to get out there and talk about how no, the liberals not the liberals or the media's not liberal. The media's not liberal. The media is actually conservative and they help out Republicans and stuff. And that should just that just goes to show you how disconnected from reality and delusional this guy is, that he actually thinks that the media is helpful to Republicans and not very progressive in how it frames issues or anything like that. That's patently false, patently absurd. I'm surprised that anybody would take anything this guy says seriously after he says something as just stupid as that and just totally disconnected from reality.
Almost every debate between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, I've seen it happen in New York Times and Washington Post stories. Whenever there is a policy that can help the average American, they go, yeah, but how are you going to pay for it? And whenever there is giant trillions of dollars of tax cuts for the rich, they're like, oh.
So this is stupid. I mean, why should I even keep playing this? They're just saying the same leftist tropes that are. They say the same thing. Tax cuts for the rich. Tax cuts for the rich. Our policies actually help people. These are tax cuts for the rich, without any discussion of. It's like, if the top 10% of all income earners in this country are paying 90% of all federal income taxes, let's use those hypothetically, and you cut taxes, where is most of the tax cuts going to go? It's like, the other second thing is, Shank, how can you have tax cuts when the bottom 50% of people pay zero in federal income taxes? How are you going to tax credits, and you just give out wealth redistribution, just hard leftist policies of wealth redistribution that have shown time and time again to be immoral and the downfall of economic systems and horrible net side effects economically and financially, in addition to morally and basis of cultural and society well-being. I mean, this is, but why am I honestly, it just bugs me to even watch this, because I've heard them tax cuts for the rich is just such a stupid thing. They say that about any kind of tax policy they dislike. There's zero depth whatsoever to the leftist critiques of tax policy. They only know how to say one thing, which is tax cuts for the rich. There's zero substantive analysis of any tax policy. They say the same exact thing about every single tax policy, and that's how you know it's so shallow and there's nothing there. There's really no substance there. It's because they say the exact same thing about every tax policy.
Well, okay, I guess that's going to stimulate the economy. No, it's not. And one other thing before we get to the Fox clip, my question is, how can we afford not to do Medicare for all?
Exactly.
Because doesn't Medicare...
So dumb. How can we afford not to spend $32 trillion on one of the worst policy ideas of all time that's not even a constitutionally enumerated power?
For all actually save money?
Exactly, and this was even from a Koch brothers funded study. They thought it was going to be this big gotcha, and then when they did the cost benefit analysis, they find that not only, what we know, that the US medical system is one of the most, if not the most expensive one in the world, but also that it's going to save us billions and if not trillions of dollars in some circumstances. So it's a system that is just more beneficial, and that is why almost every developed nation in the world has it.
Oh, look, every developed nation has it. We should be like everybody else because America isn't, no, we're not, America's just like every other random country. We should just do what every other country does. This is the worst argument that leftists ever come up with. They take an example of why the United States is better than other countries, and they take an example of how the United States is an exceptional country, and they take these policies and historical examples, which are why the United States is a beacon of freedom and liberty to freedom fighters and humans yearning to be free all around the globe for hundreds of years now. And they take those, U.S. should get rid of it because we're the only country that does it. It's like, we're the only country that does it because we're the best country and we have the most freedom-loving and liberty-loving constitution. And the other issue is that nationalized healthcare systems are an absolute disaster nightmare. Look at any country that has them. They're literally advocating for a policy proposal here that has been demonstrated to be a horrible idea everywhere it's tried. And they have one argument for it, which is that emotionally it'll make you feel good. If you support this, then you can say that you hate the rich too, and that you want to take money from people with jobs and you want to give it to people without jobs so that they can have state-of-the-art health care. Yeah, won't that make you feel good emotionally if you can support taking money from one person and giving it to another person regardless of the individual health decisions they've made throughout their life? Look, if somebody has a job and somebody else does not have a job, and the person with the job exercises and eats right and is healthy, and the person without a job doesn't exercise and doesn't eat healthy, the person with a job should have his money taken from him and given to the person without a job, because that person is going to have a lot more health expenses because they don't eat right and eat properly and they don't have a job. So that's going to hurt their mental health too. And so we need to, that's what they're advocating for. And it's honestly disgusting. And the evidence shows that these are horrible ideas. And so they rely on this whole emotional argument about, oh, if you support this, then you care for people, even though it's totally immoral to actually support something like this.
Exactly, yeah. And I wanted to just quickly touch on what you mentioned briefly, which I think you don't hear a lot of politicians talk about this. And so I'm happy you mentioned it. When it comes to the Department of Defense and our defense budget in general, you're right. No one ever has a conversation about, oh, how do we pay for it? And it's because there's so much fear.
Hello, the Department of Defense and the federal defense is a constitutionally enumerated power. It's one of the only things the federal government should be doing. And yeah, we should worry about how we talk about it. But if you're talking about handouts and giveaways and federal government socialist type policies like free healthcare for everybody and comparing that with national defense, they're not even in the same ballpark. So they need to quit making this stupid comparison. They're not even close to the same issues whatsoever. And it's the dumbest comparison of all time.
Fear-mongering about, oh, the others, we need to protect the country. No, the majority of that money goes to private contractors when it does.
You're right now. So that now the only reason that you would support the military spending is if you fear of the other and you hate minorities and stuff. And so she's basically attacking any red-blooded American that's a patriotic American and saying the only reason you like the military is because they kill people and they go to war with Muslims and blah, blah, blah. It's like so shallow. There's no truth to it whatsoever, and it's just so shallow. This is all just emotion-based, shallow appeals to virtue signaling type tendencies, and it's just honestly they're just saying the same thing over and over again. Why do liberals watch this stuff? Do they really feel like they learn anything? Here, I want to log on to the Young Turks to hear the Young Turks talk about tax cuts for the rich for the 10th time this week. How many times can you hear somebody talk about tax cuts for the rich without going any deeper whatsoever, staying at that very shallow level of just tax cuts for the rich? That's as far as the analysis goes. How many times can you hear that said and still think that it's interesting and you're learning something?
Doesn't need to, and there's a lot of waste in the military. But just to give you some statistics, some numbers, the Trump administration has asked Congress to approve $716 billion for 2019 for defense. Okay, that's
So now they're complaining again about spending on one of the only things, and then they're going to complain about Trump's tax cuts for the rich. We're now 4 minutes in, and she hasn't come even close to obliterating Fox News, and I'm getting dumber by the minute just by watching this. And look, if you can't make your point that's made in the title of the video by almost halfway through, I guess I'm about a quarter of the way through or a third, then it's clickbait. And I'm not going to sit here and waste my time anymore with people talking about tax cuts for the rich, because that's how stupid it is.